The orchestra was still playing when Prince William rose from his seat and lifted one hand. Within seconds, the music died, the ballroom doors were sealed, and hundreds of guests stared toward the stage. Private letters connected to Princess Diana had appeared inside the charity gala program, but the name printed above them was Queen Camilla's. William did not ask for an explanation. He stopped the evening. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William had entered Lancaster House expecting celebration, not betrayal. The Royal Hope Charity Gala, an annual fundraising event bringing together diplomats, donors, celebrities, and senior royals, was meant to support youth mental health organizations, shaped by Diana's compassion. He had prepared the closing address because those causes carried his mother's memory into a new generation. Catherine understood that weight and watched him carefully as an aide hurried toward their table. The aide placed a commemorative program in William's hands moments before his speech. He opened it, scanned the first page, and stopped breathing for a beat. Two extracts from Diana's unseen letters appeared beneath the words, "From the private collection of Her Majesty Queen Camilla." The title referred to Camilla in her official position as queen, but the credit suggested something far more personal: ownership, access, and permission. Catherine leaned closer and asked what was wrong. William read a second passage, and the shock in his face hardened into anger. Diana had written about a private conversation with him when he was a child, a memory no organizer should have possessed, and no palace official had the right to publish. Across the room, Camilla met his stare and tightened both hands around the table. Charles followed the silent exchange and realized the evening had crossed into dangerous territory. William moved toward the stage without waiting for an introduction. He placed the program beside the microphone and spoke with controlled force. "This gala will not continue until the origin and ownership of these letters are established." The prince then ordered the orchestra silenced, and the presentation screens turned off. No one applauded. No one dared speak. Security officers began collecting every program as Charles remained frozen beside Camilla. Then William noticed something that deepened the crisis. The approval page carried her household insignia and an authorization date from 3 weeks earlier. Yet the paper containing Diana's words felt different. It had been inserted after the official printing process. The gala had been stopped in public, but the real crisis was unfolding between three people whose history had never truly been buried and was now about to erupt. For William, the letters were not historical objects. They carried the voice of a mother he had lost before adulthood, and memories he had guarded for decades. For Camilla, the same pages threatened to revive the most painful chapter of her place within the monarchy. And for King Charles, the crisis placed him between his wife and his heir. The gala program had not simply mislabeled an archive, it had reopened a family wound. William had spent years protecting Diana's memory from people who wanted to sell it, reshape it, or use it to strengthen their own position. Every private word mattered, because the Princess of Wales had become more than a public figure after her death. She had become a symbol, claimed by millions. Yet to her sons, she remained their mother. The charity gala made the violation worse, because its youth mental health organizations were closely tied to the compassion she had shown during her life. Camilla understood the danger immediately. Her position as queen gave her an official place beside the king, but it could not erase the history that followed her. One comparison with Diana could turn years of careful public acceptance into renewed anger. Now the program made it appear that she had taken possession of private letters and presented them as part of her own royal collection. William entered a small reception room with Catherine and opened the program again. She watched him return to the passage about his childhood. His hand stopped moving. Then he closed the booklet and said quietly, "That was hers to tell, or mine, no one else's." Catherine heard grief beneath the anger. She did not ask him to soften his response or think about appearances. She told him that stopping the gala had protected Diana's dignity and prevented the charities from becoming part of a false story. William looked at her, knowing she understood why this was not a minor mistake. Someone had taken a private memory and placed another woman's name above it. Charles confronted Camilla in a separate room. He asked whether she had ever seen the letters before. She answered no. But when the king asked whether anyone in her household had discussed acquiring Diana-related material, she hesitated. That pause changed everything. Camilla remembered a general approval folder prepared by her private secretary. The folder contained permissions for historical research, meaning palace staff could review selected records for official projects. She had signed it without reading every attachment. Now she feared that her authority had been used to open something never meant for public hands. William's team soon traced the letters to a sealed palace archive, believed untouched for years. But the access record showed the seal had been broken after one private meeting. To understand how Diana's words entered Camilla's name, William would have to return to the exact moment when the palace first opened that archive. 3 months before the gala, a small memorial planning meeting took place behind closed doors at Clarence's house. It looked routine. Advisors discussed future royal charity exhibitions, old photographs, and historic objects. Then a locked blue archive box bearing Diana's initials entered the room. One decision made that evening connected the letters, Camilla's household, and the gala. It became the point of no return everyone would later wish they had stopped. Palace advisors had been developing an exhibition celebrating royal charitable work across generations. The plan linked projects connected to Diana, Charles, William, and Catherine, hoping to show how service had passed from one era to the next. A royal archive is the protected collection where official papers and private family records are stored. The committee wanted one deeply emotional item from that collection to connect Diana's compassion with William's modern mental health work. Sir Adrian Vale saw an opportunity. As Camilla's senior private secretary, he controlled much of the paperwork entering her office and understood how easily a broad signature could become powerful authority. During the meeting, Vale requested access to a sealed box marked D, Private Correspondence, 1995 to 1997. The label clearly identified letters from Diana's final years, yet he described the request as ordinary historical research. Camilla arrived near the end of the discussion, already late for another engagement. Vale placed a general research authorization before her and explained that it would help advisors review possible exhibition material. The authorization was a written permission, allowing staff to inspect selected records. She signed without reading every attachment and left within minutes, believing she had approved nothing more than routine preparation. The archivist did not share that confidence. He warned Vale that the blue box contained family correspondence never cleared for public display. Sir Adrian closed the folder, pulled it away from him, and answered, "Her Majesty's signature is already here." That sentence ended the argument, but it also turned Camilla's careless approval into a weapon. Charles later received a documented account confirming that Diana's correspondence had been reviewed. The king chose not to tell William because officials insisted no letter had been selected for public use. He believed silence would prevent unnecessary pain. Now that choice looked like concealment, and the future king would not forgive it easily. Camilla remembered everything after the gala was halted. Alone, she realized exactly which folder she had signed and whispered, "They used my name as a shield." Investigators then found a handwritten instruction added days later. It ordered excerpts to appear as a surprise tribute under Camilla's collection credit. No signature appeared, but the wording matched phrases Vale had used in earlier planning notes. William summoned Camilla, Charles, and Sir Adrian into one room, placed the program on the table, and demanded that no one leave until the truth was spoken. The archive had supplied the letters, but only a face-to-face reckoning could reveal who had turned private grief into a royal performance. The ballroom remained silent while 4 people entered a private chamber upstairs. William stood at one end of the table. Camilla sat opposite him, Charles beside her, and Sir Adrian Vale remained near the door. There were no cameras and no guests, only the program containing Diana's words. William pushed it across the table and asked, "Who decided my mother's private letters belonged beneath Camilla's name?" No one answered. William made his position clear. The gala would remain suspended until the palace identified who opened the archive, selected the passages, and approved the false ownership credit. A royal household is the team of advisors and staff, serving a senior member of the family. In this case, both Camilla's office and the king's office had handled documents connected to the event, which meant the failure could not be blamed on one careless printer. Charles tried to control the room. He reminded his son that donors, charity leaders, and foreign guests were still waiting downstairs. The king warned that every passing minute increased the damage. William did not move. He told his father that public embarrassment could be repaired. Using Diana's private words without consent could not. William turned to Camilla and asked whether she had authorized the publication. She held his gaze and answered, "I signed a research approval. I did not approve those words, and I would never call them mine." The prince heard the denial, but he could not ignore the signature. He asked how someone with years of palace experience could approve access without reading what lay beneath it. Camilla's eyes filled, yet she refused to look away. She admitted that her carelessness had given another person the power to misuse Diana's letters. The Queen said she understood why an apology was not enough. William's anger sharpened, because the damage had not come from open cruelty. It had come from indifference, dressed as procedure. Vale tried to interrupt with an explanation about administrative channels. William pulled out the chair opposite him and said, "Sit down." Sir Adrian obeyed. In that moment, rank and protocol lost their protection. Vale admitted ordering the archive review, but denied inserting the letters into the program. He claimed a second authorization had arrived from the King's Communications Office, the department responsible for official statements and public presentation. Charles rejected the claim immediately. His private secretary checked the document code against palace records and found that it belonged to a cancelled memo. The paper should have been destroyed months earlier. Charles removed his glasses and placed them on the table. He looked at Camilla with quiet disappointment, and she finally understood that this crisis threatened more than her reputation. It threatened the trust inside her marriage. William ordered a complete audit of both royal households, but only the king could make that command real. William had delivered the ultimatum. Now Charles had to decide whether the monarchy would expose its own machinery or protect it once again. Charles had spent much of his reign balancing tradition against survival, but this decision could not be softened by careful language. Protecting the palace would deepen William's belief that Diana's memory remained vulnerable inside royal walls. Supporting his son would mean authorizing an investigation into Camilla's household and exposing failures attached to the Queen's name. In the stillness of the private chamber, the king understood that neutrality was no longer an option. Charles alone held the power to suspend senior officials, release internal archive records, and remove royal approval from the gala materials. Royal approval was the formal permission showing that an event or publication carried the crown's authority. Without his order, William's demand would remain only a warning. With it, the entire palace system would be forced to open itself. Palace advisors urged Charles to call the scandal a printing error. They argued that a deeper inquiry could damage the monarchy, frighten donors, and bury the charities beneath family conflict. The king listened, but then he returned to the program and studied the passage about young William. Charles read the lines slowly. His expression changed when he understood that Diana had written about a moment meant for her son alone. Those words had never been created for public applause, royal display, or institutional ownership. They belonged to a mother and child, and the palace had treated them like promotional material. Camilla insisted that she had been manipulated. Charles believed she had not planned the publication, yet he could no longer ignore the carelessness that made it possible. Her signature had opened the door. Her household had walked through it. Protecting her completely would mean denying the harm done to William. William faced his father without raising his voice. He said he was not demanding punishment for the past or revenge against Camilla. He was demanding protection for something deeply personal that the palace had no moral right to use. The prince's control made the words heavier. Charles walked away from the table and remained silent for several seconds. Then he returned, picked up a pen, and signed an emergency order suspending Sir Adrian Vale and freezing access to all private family correspondence. The king went further. He authorized William to lead an independent review with the Royal Archives director, placing the future king above Camilla's household in the investigation. A digital access record then revealed that Vale's credentials had opened Diana's archive on 4 separate nights, not once. Charles ordered Camilla's insignia removed from every gala program. He also ruled that Diana's letters would never be displayed, quoted, or described at the rescheduled event. As Vale was escorted away, he leaned toward an aide and delivered one final warning. The letters had never been chosen to honor Camilla. They had been placed there to force William into a public reaction. The king had chosen transparency, but his decision revealed something darker. The halted gala may have been a trap designed specifically for his heir. By midnight, the gala's guests had been quietly dismissed. The programs had been confiscated, and Sir Adrian Vale's office was under guard. Yet the most painful consequence was unfolding inside the royal family. Camilla returned to Clarence House without Charles. William remained at Lancaster House reviewing archive records. Catherine watched the charities lose their most important fundraising night. The letters had disappeared from public view, but their damage was spreading through every royal household. The palace issued a statement saying the event had been postponed because of an unauthorized inclusion of private family material. That phrase meant personal documents had been used without proper permission. The wording mattered because it rejected the false idea that Diana's letters belonged to Camilla. Donors were also assured that the gala would return, and every financial promise made to the charities would be honored by the Royal Foundation, the organization supporting William and Catherine's charitable work. Camilla entered her private sitting room alone. She removed her gala brooch, placed it on the table, and dismissed the attendant waiting nearby. When the door closed, the Queen finally began to cry. Vale had betrayed her trust, but she could not escape her own failure. She had signed the authorization. Now she feared William would forever connect her name with the exploitation of his mother's memory. William felt no victory. Catherine found him alone beside a stack of recovered programs, reading the same page again and again. The prince looked exhausted, not triumphant. He had stopped the gala and protected Diana's words, yet hundreds of charities had lost their most important fundraising night because someone had turned private grief into a weapon. Catherine took the booklet from his hand and tore out the page carrying Camilla's name. She told him the false credit was gone, but that was no longer enough. William now had to decide whether Diana's letters should remain sealed forever or whether some part of them could ever be used with dignity and consent. Investigators uncovered something darker before dawn. Vale had prepared a press briefing predicting that William would react emotionally, while Camilla remained calm before the guests. The briefing, found in a documented communications file, showed that the disruption had been planned as a test of character. The scheme was brutal in its simplicity. William would appear unstable, while the Queen would appear composed and worthy of controlling Diana's charitable legacy. His pain had been designed to become her advantage. Charles visited Camilla later that night. He did not accuse her of planning the trap, but he told her that trust could not survive on signatures given without responsibility. She accepted every word. Camilla then asked for one private meeting with William. No king, no advisors, no aides. She believed only one act could prevent the damage from becoming permanent. The public machinery had begun assigning blame, but the decisive moment would come without witnesses, titles, or anyone else to speak for them. The next morning, William entered a small library at Clarence's house and found Camilla waiting alone. No private secretaries stood outside the door. Charles had not joined them. The program, the investigation, and the language of royal duty were absent. On the table sat only a sealed archive envelope and Camilla's written renunciation of any claim over Diana's letters. For the first time since the gala stopped, neither of them had an institution to hide behind. Camilla had requested the meeting because she knew a palace statement could correct the record, but could not repair the personal injury. A written renunciation was a formal document giving up any claim or authority. William agreed to come only after confirming that Diana's original letters had been returned to their sealed archive box, and that no copies remained inside the Queen's household. Camilla spoke first. She told William she had not ordered the publication, and had never intended to place her name above Diana's words. But she did not hide behind that denial. She accepted that her signature had empowered people she failed to supervise, and her carelessness had allowed private grief to become public material. William listened without interrupting. Then he told her the deepest wound was not simply seeing Camilla's name in print. It was discovering that his mother's private voice had once again been treated as something belonging to the crown, ready to be edited, displayed, and used whenever the palace found it useful. Camilla lowered her voice and admitted what years of official statements had never said. In that private conversation, she confessed that she had spent too long trying to escape Diana's shadow. Advisors had persuaded her that controlling part of the late princess's charitable legacy would strengthen her own place beside Charles. She had not ordered the letters taken, but she had allowed ambition and fear to weaken her judgment. Camilla pushed the signed renunciation across the table. William read every line, folded the page once, and asked whether she understood that Diana's memory could never be absorbed into another royal identity. Camilla answered that she finally did. She agreed that every future decision involving Diana's private correspondence would belong to William and Harry alone, not to the king, the queen, or the palace communications office. William did not offer ceremonial forgiveness. He accepted her accountability and agreed he would not publicly accuse her of intentionally stealing the letters. That was not peace, but it was truth. William paused before leaving and told Camilla that responsibility mattered more than image. She remained seated, shaken but relieved that the meeting had ended without permanent hatred. Their agreement cleared the way for Charles to release the investigation's findings and rebuild the gala around a different purpose. The private wound had finally been named. Now the monarchy had to face the world without disguising what had happened. At sunrise, the story escaped the palace gates. Television crews surrounded Lancaster House. Newspapers replaced their planned front pages, and crowds gathered outside Kensington Palace, carrying photographs of Diana. Yet the reaction was not driven only by anger toward Camilla or sympathy for William. The public had witnessed something rare, a future king stopping a royal spectacle to protect a private memory. By midday, the halted gala had become a national argument about ownership, grief, and accountability. The palace released its preliminary findings before noon. A preliminary finding is an early official conclusion, issued before every detail of an investigation is complete. The statement confirmed that Diana's letters had been accessed without proper family consent and falsely credited to Camilla's private collection. Sir Adrian Vale was permanently dismissed from royal service. His archive credentials were revoked, and new protections were announced for all private family correspondence. The London Chronicle captured the mood in one brutal image. Its front page showed William standing alone at the darkened gala podium beneath the headline, "He stopped the music for Diana." The story did not present him as reckless. It described the prince as a son who had refused to let ceremony become more important than consent. Crowds gathered outside Kensington Palace by early afternoon. Hundreds stood beside the memorial gates carrying flowers, old photographs, and handwritten notes. One woman placed a card beneath Diana's portrait that read, "Her voice was never theirs to rename." That sentence spread across broadcasts because it expressed what many people felt in simple terms. A national broadcaster framed the crisis as more than a feud between William and Camilla. During a recorded evening report, the presenter called it the moment the monarchy admitted that memory does not become royal property simply because it enters a palace archive. Camilla remained the center of fierce debate. Some commentators blamed her for signing the authorization without reading it. Others recognized that the Queen had accepted responsibility and surrendered every claim over Diana's private letters. Her accountability did not erase the mistake, but it changed the public judgment from deliberate theft to dangerous carelessness. Charles then confirmed the most important change in a televised palace statement. William and Harry would hold final authority over any future use of their mother's personal correspondence. The king's decision created a permanent boundary no royal office could overturn. William watched the announcement from Kensington Palace beside Catherine. When the ownership clause was read aloud, he exhaled and took her hand. The protection was no longer private. It was official. Donations surged after supporters learned the gala would return without exploiting Diana's words. The first evening had ended in shock. The second would reveal whether the monarchy had truly learned from the wound it exposed. 2 weeks later, the chandeliers were lit again, the orchestra returned, and the guests entered the same ballroom where William had stopped the music. But the disputed programs were gone. Diana's letters remained sealed. No private grief was displayed to attract applause or donations. Instead, William walked to the stage, carrying a single prepared statement. Charles and Camilla sat in the front row, knowing the monarchy's final response would be measured by what he said next. The rescheduled Royal Hope Charity Gala had been rebuilt around the charities themselves. No archive exhibition remained. No private correspondence appeared in the program. The palace had also introduced permanent rules requiring direct written consent from William and Harry before any of Diana's letters, recordings, or personal notes could be used publicly. Written consent meant clear approval, recorded in advance, removing the power of advisors to make that decision alone. William reached the microphone and briefly looked toward Charles and Camilla. Then the prince said that love for the past must never become permission to possess it. His voice remained controlled, but every word carried the pain of the first evening. He explained that Diana's greatest legacy was not hidden inside secret letters. It lived in the compassion, courage, and service continued through the causes she had supported. Camilla accepted the consequences without protest. Her name had been formally removed from every record suggesting ownership of Diana's correspondence. The Queen also covered the operational costs lost when the first gala was cancelled, but she did so privately and asked for no public praise. Her decision could not erase the mistake, yet it showed that she had finally understood the difference between responsibility and image. Charles then acknowledged through a documented palace statement that royal authority had failed when it valued presentation above consent. The king's support for the investigation restored part of the trust damaged between him and William. More importantly, it created a boundary that no household official could quietly cross again. William made one final choice. He did not destroy the letters, and he did not publish them to prove his case. The future king returned them to the archive beneath a new family seal, a formal protection preventing access without approval. That act revealed the truth of his purpose. He had never wanted revenge. He wanted protection. Catherine met William after he stepped away from the podium. He told her the letters were safe. For the first time since the crisis began, his face carried relief instead of anger. The orchestra began again, only after William returned to his seat. This time, he did not stop the music. Diana's words remained private. The charities received their support, and the monarchy moved forward with a lesson it could never again pretend not to understand. The gala began as an attempt to place Diana's voice beneath another woman's name. It ended with that voice returned to the people who had the deepest right to protect it. And with William proving that some boundaries are powerful precisely because they will never be crossed again. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.